But right now I have Paula Slier on the telephone, CEO of Newshound and Middle East Bureau Chief of Russia Today. Paula, good morning and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure.
So, Paula, I mean, we've seen your face many, many times reporting. We've heard your voice many, many times. I know you do a lot of reporting for 702 and here also on chaifm. And these are very, very interesting times that we are living in. But let's go back in time, Paula. Let's go back. I know that Bev Malone, I think you were at school with Bev Malone. Does Bev's name ring a bell?
No.
Well, Paula, I'm putting you on the spot.
That was on the spot. I was like, how do I get out of this one?
Like, do you remember when you were a little girl? Bev Malone joins us every Friday, and she often talks about goal setting and realizing dreams. And she mentioned your name. I think you were at school together. I don't know. And she said, it was a camp, or I'm not sure. I don't know the details, and I don't want to be called a liar.
You've just found my weak point. I can never remember names.
Listen,
I remember facts and dates, but names is my shortcoming.
I don't believe it for a journalist. Never, never. Don't tell anyone. We'll pretend we didn't hear. And she was just saying that when we were all talking about what you want to be, when you grow up, or what you want to do, and she said that you were very clear about wanting to be an international journalist, that's what you want to do. And she just found it so amazing that you followed your dream and that you've realized your dream. Is that true, Paula? Is that something you always wanted to do?
Well, it's lovely to hear that, and thank you for telling me that. It wasn't my dream growing up. I mean, I actually wanted to be a school teacher.
Okay.
And now I think back, that. And then I had this, when I was at university, I was studying law, and I always had this dream of wanting to make a difference. I know it sounds so naive, but that's where I was. I wanted to become a human rights lawyer, and it was my way of kind of trying to make sense of growing up in South Africa. But I found law a bit boring, and I'd always been good at writing. And I think, like many of us, you kind of fall into a career where you're good at writing, so you always do it. And then they began Shalom TV. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
It was a program on Mnet with Helen Helderman.
Yes, of course.
And I was saying to a friend the other day, I really owe my whole career to Helen Helderman because she gave me my first chance at Shalom TV. I started off, I was still at university. I was interviewing young people. I mean, most people have photographs of their friends from those years. I have all my friends on Shalom TV, where I landed up interviewing them in the youth class.
Yes.
But certainly, I would say from that age, it was a dream to be a journalist. And sometimes I still feel like, if this is all a dream, I don't want to pinch myself and wake up because it's a fantastic dream to live.
And that's how it feels. You're truly living your passion.
It definitely does feel like that. I mean, if I can give you one example of when I'm just in my complete ultimate.
Yes.
I was recently in Libya, and I love doing live television. I think it's when it all comes together. You're so focused on the moment. And the example is that I was standing there in Tripoli, and the bombs were dropping, and I was doing a live report with Moscow. And everybody was starting to run indoors, and I could see people putting on helmets and flak jackets, and I was standing there without one. And the instinct is not to stay. The instinct actually is to run. But you get such an adrenaline rush. And it's that feeling of, wow, I'm really actually center stage where history is being made, where the story is unfolding, where the headlines are happening. And it's so... On one level, it's so empowering because you really are doing something important, or at least I feel that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. And on the other hand, it's using up every iota of everything you have. I mean, I'm so focused. I'm not very good at remembering names. You just found out. I'm so focused on remembering dates and facts and telling the story and trying to appear calm and not be caught up in the fear and the anxiety around me. And I think I would be hard pressed to find that in another career where you find such fulfillment in every second of what you're doing. And of course, it's not like that all the time. But there's enough moments like that make me really enjoy what I'm doing.
I suppose people ask you those questions, and this is what you have to think about regularly. When you go into war-torn countries, when your life is at risk, you're talking about this adrenaline, and I can definitely get a sense of that. But when I think, as you've said, your natural response is to turn and run. Does death cross your mind? Do you actually ever think, I could be killed?
It's interesting. As I'm getting older, I start thinking that. I mean, last year I was in Afghanistan. We did about once a year I got on the embed with the American troops there. And it just so happened that week we were reporting from Kabul, and we got into a routine where we would meet our translator in front of the hotel every day at 9 o'clock. It was just a comfortable time for him. It was a comfortable time for us. And then we would go out and do our filming and our work throughout the course of the day. That day, there was this one morning where you have to think, is it Murphy's Law? Is it fate? Is there someone looking after me? The person could only make the interview at 8:30. So we left the hotel at about 8:20. And at 9 o'clock on the dot, the same time that every week we would leave, and we would meet the translator in front of the hotel, exactly in that spot in front of the hotel, a bomb went off and it killed 9 people.
Sure.
And I remember coming home that night back to the hotel because we couldn't get in before then and thinking, what am I doing? Like, is it really so important that I'm here? Because yes, on the one hand, I'm motivated and it is important, but is it really worth risking my life for? And when I had a moment like that, when I came so close to death, or you ask all these questions about fate and religion and really, is it worth risking your life? And the truth is, as I'm getting older, I'm not so sure it is. I remember an editor I've always respected, Jimmy Matthews. He was my boss at SABC many years ago, and he said no story is worth putting your life on the line for. And I think he's right. But the problem is that if you think about death all the time when you go to these places and you think about being afraid, I would never do anything. I would never go to these places. So you kind of push it to the back of your mind and try not to think about it because you don't really have an option.
Yeah. Look, I don't know if I watch too much TV, but the thought of going into Afghanistan and, even going into Libya and Egypt at the time, because you've been there and you continue to go there, and just the thought that there could be a chance of being kidnapped and disappearing and being at the hands of people who have very little sense of, what's right or wrong at that particular time is, gee whiz. I mean, I really do. That for me would be such a huge fear, Paula.
But that's why I'm saying you're 100% accurate, and maybe you're more healthy than me, because the fact that I'm not kind of tuned into it all the time is not necessarily a good thing. And I think that's something is perhaps, I don't know what comes first, the journalist or the person.
Interesting.
But I think people sometimes are attracted to kind of the danger zones because we have something in our personality that's able to switch off. And I'm not necessarily convinced that it's something that I should be proud of. But I certainly can't focus on the fear because, another example that just pops to mind is a couple of years ago I was in Sabra and Shatila in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And I've heard so much about the camps, and I was always curious to go and visit them. And we were completely lost, me and the cameraman. He was Russian, and neither of us speak Arabic, and neither of us had been there before. And we stopped this little kid in the street, and he asked us to follow him. And I remember following him down these little alleys and up these streets and up these stairs. And I remember thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, if I just had to stop for one moment, he could have been taking us absolutely anywhere.
Yeah.
So when you go to these places where you're not familiar with the people and you don't speak the language, you really are at the mercy of those you come into contact with. So you put your faith in them because if you don't, you can't actually work. But what? You need to put your faith in one person, and just that one person goes wrong, that just displace your faith once, and you've had it. But, it goes back to not being able to think about it in the moment, because if I do, I will be paralyzed and I won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, though, is after the stories, when I come back, and I have time to digest them, then I get frightened. When I tell people stories and, that we were here or there and this happened, and then people go, wow, weren't you scary? And then I'm scared, and then I'll stop for a moment and I'll think, they've got a point. That actually was a bit risky.
But it's amazing that you're almost in another zone when you're there.
I think so. I think you do zone out. But I think that's the nature of journalism. I'm not 100% sure that it's not true for most journalists, because we have we have kind of a tool that puts distance between us and what we're happening and what's happening, and that's the camera. So I'm walking into an area. I'm not completely in the area because I'm so focused on, I need to get an interview, I need to find this, I need to, and directing the cameraman, and he's got the camera. So you could be witnessing something, but in a way you're a bit removed from it because you're not in the moment. You, as you say, you're a bit zoned out, and you're so focused on seeing it through the eyes of a professional. Really, I'll walk into a complex and people will be shooting, and I'll be, okay, I must get that sound.
Sure.
Let's make sure I get that interview.
So there is a slight detachment.
If I wasn't there. Sorry?
It's almost like you're experiencing it almost in another dimension.
I think so. I mean, while we're talking, another example that comes to mind is Iraq. Okay, and I'd always been a bit scared of going to Iraq. And I remember going on a night patrol, and I felt like, and I've just gone blank what the movie's called, but there was a movie about Iraq where they showed what it was like to be with the American troops in their in their Humvees and going out on patrol at night. And I remember I'd seen the movie, and then I was in Iraq, and I remember thinking, I feel like I'm in a movie. I feel like I'm in that movie. I'm sitting in the back of these vehicles.
Sure.
I'm looking at the youngsters on the streets, and they're not looking at me as if they like me at all, because, of course, when you're on an embed with the soldiers, people don't really differentiate between the journalist and the soldiers. You're part and parcel of them, and there really is no denying that when you're out on these patrols, the locals, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, they don't like this foreign presence, and it can be very, very dangerous.